Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to our recap of the Portland Cocktail Week Distance Learning with Campari team. This is amazing. My name is Michael Moberly, your friendly neighborhood Spider Michael Moberly. I'm getting very excited for Spider-Man in a couple days. Today, we have the sweetest, most wonderful hosts in the world. We have Louise Marquis, Monique Brackett, Xavier, Herit, and Benny Hurwitz with us, which is like an all-star team of beautiful people. So excited to talk to them. Today, we're going to look back at the past year's worth of classes. We're going to talk briefly about some of their favorite ones and look into the experiences of hosting all this stuff. I know virtual life is its own special life, so we're going to get a little perspective on that. But first, before we jump in, there are 4 things I need you to do. First, I need you to like us on Facebook. That's how you find out about all these wonderful things, and you can look back on all of these classes previously. You can subscribe to our channel on YouTube. There we have their channel set up so you can see things by category and style, and that way you can kind of navigate a little bit differently. Or if you're like me, you could just turn YouTube on in the background while you're cooking for all of your holiday food and catch up on some of the stuff you may have missed. You can also follow us on Instagram, where we're doing fun prizes and giveaways and photo contests and some great stuff there. And then if you'd like, please ask questions in the comments or just send some holiday messages to these wonderful people, because they've been so great and hosted so many classes. Dave, our super producer, was talking about we've done over 100 classes this year, which is crazy. That's hundreds of hours of content. So I'm so grateful for all of these people who are joining us today. But first, I want to start out with Xavier and talk about one of his favorite classes. Xavier, you want to join me here?
Yes. Hi, Michael. How are you doing?
Hello. Oh, so good. So the class that we're going to talk about with you was one of my favorites. Aren't you glad it's Grand Marnier Day? So tell us about Grand Marnier Day.
Well, it's basically the day before Bastille Day. The Grand Marnier Day is the National Grand Marnier Day on Bastille Day on July 14th. What we did to celebrate this is we invited Donny Clutterbuck, and I was happy to actually host his session. First of all, a lot of the presenters we met through Portland Cocktail Week were awesome, but also some people I've never seen in person. So I was so happy to meet so many talented people and presenters through Portland Cocktail Week. So thank you very much for organizing this every time.
And you got to talk to Donnie, who's like a legendary mind in our industry. Like he dove so deep into citrus and uses for citrus. What did you think about, the level of science he brought to this class?
I thought it was interesting. I thought it was it was very detailed about, hey, I like the fact that there's a lot of things, a lot of waste we have sometimes behind the bar. So if you want to use an orange peel for an old fashioned, what do we do? What do you do with the rest of the orange juice? So maybe sometimes you need some orange juice, maybe sometimes you don't. And it stays in your fridge for a few days, and after it ends up to be in the garbage. So I think a lot of the techniques that Donnie shows us was, hey, we can also use the orange, and we can fortify the orange by making an orange cordial. So this technique was really well done. I think it's something very accessible for everyone who works behind the bar. Of course, the recipe is accessible online. The class is still accessible online. And basically making an orange cordial, it's cooking, pasteurizing the orange juice that he showed, that he did in front of us, by blending also some sugar. So he made basically an orange syrup. And he fortified this orange syrup by using Grand Marnier. And Grand Marnier, which is, of course, a cognac orange liqueur, was a perfect combination for this orange cordial, also to combine into the old-fashioned. I think the whole thing, how it started, and I thought it was really cool, it's basically started from this original old-fashioned, which was back in the days with muddled cherries and muddled orange, almost like a fruit salad, if you think about it. I'm sorry to say that, but
I call it the fruit salad option when people ask for it. I said, you want your fruit salad old-fashioned?
Exactly. And I like to say it's cool because we're able to, which is amazing. It was a little reminder about how industry has evolved so much from, we only started to make Prep behind the bar in the 2000. So right. We're in 2021, and like at the bar now, we do sous vide syrup, we do all these things. So it was interesting to see, hey, how we change our way to work behind the bar, and it's always evolving. And I really love also the fact that he were able to build this I would say 3 steps old fashioned by just not even using a sugar cube, just using this orange cordial, which was a half ounce and 2 ounces of whiskey and bitters, and that's it. And you stir it, and it seems very delicious.
People are always kind of afraid of those more science-based classes because they see the charts and they hear the terminology. But Donnie does such a great job of bringing it to us and making it accessible. So Dave, let's get a clip of this going. Let's show them a little bit about what we're talking about.
So the muddled cordial is what we're calling it, in what we're now referring to as the method old-fashioned, because method is order and muddle is disorder. Get it? Cool, right? It's not a bad name either. It's a 1-to-1 orange simple syrup diluted 1-to-1 with orange liqueur. So first, juice all your leftover oranges. And if you don't have leftover oranges, just juice oranges, I guess, or peel them in advance. Maybe make a macerate of those peels with alcohol, atomizer. Shoot me an Instagram message about that, and I'll tell you what I did there for anybody who cares. So you probably peel oranges for Negronis and old fashions. You need peels in your drinks typically. Not need, want. Most people, some people want that. We do a lot of that. We have a lot of leftover oranges. It's been a problem. We feed them to the kitchen staff. Sometimes we juice them for brunch, but in reality, a lot of them end up just like getting forgotten about. And I don't like that. It's always kind of bothered me. So we juice the leftover oranges. And immediately heat pasteurize to stall the bittering and oxidation. If you read the Bar book by Jeffrey Morgenthaler, not that it's narrative based or anything, but somewhere in the very beginning of it, it tells you that orange juice, as soon as you juice it, there's something either in the pith or the pulp, 2 compounds called NARL and LARL, I think, that almost immediately begin to bitter the juice. So you have a very short amount of time before the juice becomes a juice that you don't want. And my personal research has led to me thinking that's about 5 hours until it's sort of undrinkable if you're really paying attention. You can choke anything down, but it's not fun. So since you have under 5 hours and ideally under 1, slap it in a pot, bring it up to a simmer, let it roll back down. It's pasteurized by heat. There are 2 things you can do at this point. One of them is not necessary. It's just what I did because I really dig the idea of uniformity within drinks. Again, no chunks, right? If you have a centrifuge or you're familiar with agar clarification, take all the solids out. Get rid of them so that you don't have to feel like you have to shake it or tumble the bottle before you pour this cordial that you're about to make, because eventually the particulate will settle out. It's not something that I like to have to deal with, so I ran it through a centrifuge. So juice the fruit, pasteurize the juice, run it through a centrifuge. Now you have pasteurized, clarified orange juice. You can make a 1-to-1 Demerara simple with that by taking a liter of this clarified orange juice and a kilogram of Demerara sugar and incorporating them. You can use a little bit of heat to do that. Try not to evaporate all of the orange juice, though, because then you're going to get a weird sugar level every time. If you have less liquid in the same amount of sugar, not a good practice to get into. So I did it at room temp and just stirred it for a while I was doing other prep. So 1-to-1 Demerara simple with clarified orange juice, and then you have this orange Demerara simple, which is delicious, but may not be shelf stable. It probably isn't shelf stable because it's just sugar and juice, and those 2 things don't really, they're going to grow sea monkeys at some point. And a way to get them to not grow sea monkeys over the course of time is take this now, let's say 1,400 milliliters. No, let's do this easier. Liter of Demerara orange syrup that you have and combine it with a liter of Grand Marnier. And now you have a stable cordial that has the muddling done in advance and uses a product that you probably were going to either throw out or eat or frantically juice during brunch service or whatever was going to happen to those already peeled, kind of now ugly fruits.
I mean, I made that right after that class and was just drinking it on its own because I love oranges and I love Grand Marnier. So for me, I was like, this is made for me. But what a great technique and such a great topic. And also I love your striped shirt, and that personally, I was like, I was editing that video and I was like, I got to get me a striped shirt. So
actually, if I may highlight for the striped shirt, it was a pure coincidence. we just literally did a quick rehearsal before. I say, are you wearing this shirt? I say, okay, no, just do it.
I mean, we love it when our guests match our hosts, but we do our best not to. But Xavier, thank you so much for that class. Thank you so much for hosting this year and sharing all your knowledge about Grand Marnier and your passion as well. We really appreciate it so much. But next up, we have everyone's favorite industry elf. I'm super excited. I just sent out my gift. I'm super happy. If you haven't, got to get on that. And Louise, come on in. Let's talk about one of your classes.
I like being an elf. I think that's fun.
I am like filling my wife's stockings with little bottles of Grand Marnier is like one of her little elf things. So I'm excited about that. I got little bottles of that, and she's like, "Oh, where do you get those?" So let's talk about your class. I mean, you hosted so many classes. We're so grateful for all of the hosting work that you did, but you picked one that is my favorite title for all of our classes. Screw Banks.
Screw Banks. Well, that's why I picked it, because then I knew we got to say the title multiple times today.
Which is always the fun part. When we went back and forth on the title and you sent that, and I was like, if you're down, I'm down, because I love that one. So
it wasn't an option. It was St. John like insisting. He's like, this is the title. He's a reporter, so he really wanted like a good, strong lead line.
Gotta grab him there with that title. And it was also one of our most like popular classes for sure. Tell us a little bit about how that class came about.
Well, St. John is, I mean, an incredible entrepreneur and someone who's really community-based and someone who came out of the hospitality industry. He didn't come from finance and then move his way into restaurants. He's always worked in restaurants and writing and journalism. And so he wanted to lead a class about how to raise money for a business without doing the traditional investing, like the general kind of ways that you do that, because those all have their own pitfalls. And so he, through a bunch of work, figured out this way of doing kind of this crowdsourced funding, and he used it to raise the money for Gage and Tollner, which has been incredibly successful and is doing really well, and was a kind of a neat kind of alternative solution to fundraising he really wanted to share. So he pitched the class and we just got to sponsor it. He happens to be a good friend of mine. And so it was a pleasure to get to work with him.
I think, as hard as it's been to do these classes and do them virtually, I think there's been topics that we may not have gotten to cover in person. And with this one in particular, I was like, this is subjects that we don't always talk about. And I was so grateful for his expertise and that wonderful dynamic of having used these things and put them into practice. So let's actually take a little.
Yeah, let's watch it.
Let's take a look.
Yeah. And I was like, why couldn't a normal person invest in a bank, or invest in a business? And there was a law that was like, you had to have a certain amount of money, right, to be able to invest, or you had to have a certain amount of money, because the government was essentially trying to protect people from making riskier things. But it was like the things they categorized as risky investments were not actually risky investments, and actually disabled people who did want to take the risk to also earn that reward. They weren't able to do it. So people fought really hard to be able to do this kind of investing that had not been available.
Yeah, totally. And just to be clear, investing in restaurants is risky. We all know that. But if you want to invest in your neighborhood restaurant and you want to invest $1,000 that you can afford to lose, right. Now you're able to do that, whereas 10 years ago you were not. That's
right. I pulled you off track. Just to say that's why it was like that there was this law in place that was meant to be protecting investors, but really it was just not allowing them to make those choices for themselves. And to your point, there are risky and there are safe investments, and there are things that are safe to ask people to commit to.
What I wanted to say earlier was prior to this new rule, in order to invest, you had to demonstrate a net worth of $2 million, which
is crazy. That's how the rich get richer. It makes me so mad.
I know. Well, they changed everything, so now things have loosened up a little bit, and we can start to do some fun things with finance.
I mean, that was such an insightful thing. I had no idea that that we couldn't invest before. Those tools were not available, and now they are. And I thought that was kind of the most important part of that course, is that, we can invest in the things we're passionate about and ask for help in totally new ways.
Yeah. I mean, he made a great point. I realized how much I just talked over him in that session, but I was trying to clarify that point because it's such an important one, that the laws changed and we're able to do that. Before, people weren't really able to invest in a neighborhood restaurant in the way that they are now, or invest in anything they want, honestly. And there is that risk, and it is risky. It's never a guarantee, but it does allow us, with some knowledge and some skill and some bravery, to figure out where we want to put our money more freely.
Yeah, and it's also, I will say one thing about this class, the most liberal use of Scrooge McDuck out of all of our classes. I think he had 3 shots of Scrooge McDuck, which I really big fan of that. So I love that very much. But thank you
If
again.
you're talking about money and not using Scrooge McDuck, you're doing something wrong.
It is that perfect dream of wanting to dive duck style into some money. So, well, we appreciate everything you do for us as always. And it's been a wonderful blessing to have you here with us for so many different classes. But that one in particular, I appreciate so much. So thank you again. And to bring on the next one, Benny, you ready to talk pickles with me?
Oh, yeah. Always ready to talk pickles.
So let's talk a little bit about Doug and his pickles and why you chose this class to talk about today.
Well, just first of all, I love all things pickled, vegetables, hard-boiled eggs, you name it. So already near and dear. I still haven't quite adventured into making the pickles myself, even though, you know, he makes it pretty straightforward with the recipes and everything that he offers in this class. I'm still been holding off on doing it, but I'm really going to dive in soon. I promise. So,
I mean, I'm a pickled egg guy. I love a pickled egg. That was one thing I was like talking to Doug. I was like, we need to do a pickled egg class because I'm a big fan. And it's you know, you used to see him a little bit more ubiquitously around different bars, but now you don't see any pickled eggs. And I feel like he's the guy to lead that charge for us. But you know, one thing that I don't think was asked in that class that after I was reviewing it to put these clips together, what's your favorite pickled item?
Oh, dude, that's so hard. I mean, I'd have to just say classic cucumbers, you know, if I had to only choose one to eat forever. Mm-hmm. But I also love like pickled green beans, pickled eggs. Actually, I do know a bar that still has them here in LA, which is pretty awesome. But yeah, just have to go cucumber because there's so many things you can do. You can make them spicy. You can make bread and butter where they're a little sweet. And then, of course, like the classic dill and garlic pepper, like that's just the best.
Now, are you a crunch guy? Do you want like a big snap, or are you looking for like a little softer?
I like the crunch. The pickles, when you buy them in the store, they have to be from the refrigerated section. Pro tip. My dad told me that when I was young. Don't get the pickles off the shelf. Get them from the refrigerated section. They're always better.
I mean, that is life advice if I've ever heard some. But let's look at this clip we put together to see a little bit more advice.
I don't know. Let's go in.
Love it.
Because, you know, we got to talk picklebacks, right? I mean, who would be if we didn't? So why do we think people love picklebacks in general? And then what is your ideal brine and wild turkey pairing? Whichever wild turkey expression and whichever
the 101. Sorry to cut you off, but the 101 for sure. Always the 101.
All right. 101.
One of my favorite pickles that I've made from the same, you know, regular garlic, sour, bash, and brine that I've made is that what I've done is actually taken fresh horseradish, grated the fresh horseradish, put a little bit of vinegar, salt, sugar, sort of prepare that. So what I'll do when I jar it is I'll just throw a whole big scoop of horseradish in the bottom and then fill it up with pickles and the brine. In the end, you know, you give that a couple days to sit, and the whole thing just reeks of that fresh, bright, spicy horseradish. That with the spice behind on the 101, might need a nap afterwards, but man, delicious.
No.
Really
sounds
great.
Like that'll clear your sinuses as well.
That will clear your everything.
All right. Well, last but not least,
yeah, get me.
What pickled ingredient should everyone really be eating and enjoying all the time?
I don't want to be dramatic with it, but I mean, having kimchi around changed my life. I really like it. It's good for you, and the health benefits are supposedly huge. You know, between the antioxidants and everything else that it provides, it's very good for you. And I've just developed such an affinity for it. Like I don't want to be without it. That would be my push. I would say if you're going to try anything, go with the kimchi.
I agree with him. I can't get enough kimchi personally. Kimchi and eggs is like my breakfast of choice, making me crave that. But I mean, when was your last pickleback after that? Was you leave that class right afterwards and give it a try?
I wish I could say I did. But what I will say is I actually had kimchi last night at a Korean restaurant. So that is definitely a staple in my diet as well. And like he said, there's a lot of health benefits from it.
Well, Benny, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and with everyone this past year. This obviously a super fun class, but you've hosted some great ones, and thank you so much for your passion for wild turkey and bringing it to such a briny class such as that one. So with that, we're going to bring Monique on and talk about one of my personal favorite classes. I mean, all of these are awesome. I was lucky enough to get to edit all these together and rewatch all these classes, which I recommend you do on our Portland Cocktail Week YouTube page. But Monique, come on up and let's talk about, let's dive right into Thoughtful Tropical with Chalky Tom. How are you?
Hey, Michael, I'm good. How are you?
So good.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. So tell us a little bit about, why you chose Thoughtful Tropical. I love Chalky. The content she's done with us has been so thought-provoking and so full of care. How do you feel about that class? What made you choose that one?
Yes. So, I am new to the brand ambassador world. And one of the things that I wanted to be sure of as I embarked on this journey is to learn about our different causes. And for sure, everything that was going on this past year, conversation around Tiki was on the forefront. And so I wanted to use that second voice to be around people like Chalky and Jade Marley, just to kind of get an understanding of what some of the other communities are going through in our industry. And so Chalky has done a great job, and her team have done a great job of identifying and defining what being thoughtfully tropical should look like, right? And how we can focus on changing up some of the vernacular and focusing on the history, and first and foremost, pushing up and uplifting the community of those particular areas. And so I thought it was super important to highlight that as one of those Portland Cocktail Week videos that people should just go back and just keep watching because, it's always practice makes perfect, right? So I think the more you understand how to be an ally to certain communities, the better and the easier it ends up being.
And we do all these classes. I love technique classes, and I love, culinary focus classes, even though, finance classes, but those ideas, those cultural ideas and asking those harder questions is super important and something I know we'll continue doing in the future. But I know that this was one of our earlier in the year classes, and I thought it was a great way to start the year with more of those insightful questions that we got to ask. So let's take a look at the tail end of that video or of that clip from y'all.
Awesome.
Doing that, I wanted to kind of go back through some things that you said and just get a sense of what your ideas are for next steps. Like, where do we go from here? And one of the things that I wrote down is how do we broach the conversation in terms of appreciation, so that it doesn't feel offensive for someone who may not be comfortable immediately approaching it. How do you suggest that they can have that honest, non-offensive approach to it?
Well, I think one of the things that is important to note is that a lot of times, especially as I've done this work and I've interacted with the Tiki community beyond just hospitality, because, in Europe, it's a hospitality thing. In the US, it's an entire lifestyle. But one of the biggest misconceptions I've had from my perspective was not seeing that a lot of people that were doing appropriative things thought that they were doing appreciation. So, like a lot of times, sometimes it just takes a simple conversation, just being like, hey, this is, like a weird sensitive subject, and it's probably something you don't think about, but I noticed that you like these things, maybe you should learn more. And if you like this representation, find out more about, like, if you like this particular carving, find out where it came from, find out about the people that made it. Yeah. Find out like what life is like for them. And I think one of the biggest things is, especially with a whole cocktail concept that's based on an era, like not realizing that, treating people like living relics is kind of dehumanizing. So adding that humanity and culture is very much vibrant and alive, I think, into people's like perception is very key to that.
I just, I can listen to Chucky speak all day. I really can. And the care and thought that goes into all of her presentations, it's great. And that question from you, those next steps, I think are so important.
Yeah, it's important for everybody to understand that we're one community, and we're doing things in our industry to push forward conversation. And I hope that in the coming years, we continue to do that and we continue to lock arms and really focus on how we're going to represent the different BIPOC, the Asian Pacific community, other communities that definitely need bigger representation in our industry. So I love that. And I think for someone who's new to the brand ambassador world, I was like, yeah, use this voice. And Chalky, she used her voice for sure.
She uses it. She cannonballs right in there. And that's what I love about her. I really do. So let's get everyone back on, if you wouldn't mind, Dave. And we'll just give a quick little goodbye. And thank you so much once again. I from the bottom of my heart and everyone else who watches these classes, thank you so much for being so thoughtful and kind and putting all this work in. You take your time out of your day and emails and stuff to talk to the presenters, and it means the world to us at Portland Cocktail Week, but I know it means the world to people watching at home. The thousands of views that we've gotten are reflective of that. And so if you can, please go back and watch all these wonderful classes. If you're sitting at home like me and it just snowed out and you want to kill some time, it's a great way to learn some stuff while you do that and see these wonderful people. So thank you guys so much for everything this year. I hope you have a wonderful holiday, and I can't wait to see you in person because that's coming up soon. So cheers to more drinks and hands with friends, and thank you for sharing this year.